Hello again. Welcome to the New Testament portion of our course, Introduction to the Biblical Studies. In the next several sessions, we'll be looking at the content and themes of the New Testament in some depth. But today we want to just take a quick overview of the New Testament. We'll be looking at the dates of the New Testament, the language and organization of the New Testament, as well as the religious environment of the New Testament, especially the Greco-Roman religions and the Second Temple Judaism. When we think about the dates of the New Testament, the first thing that comes to mind is when it was written. It was written, most scholars would agree, in the last half of the first century. Some would go a little bit earlier for the earliest writings, and some might go a little bit later, but most would agree that it's in the second half, usually by the end of AD 90. There's two key dates that we need to think about when it comes to the New Testament. First of all is the death of Jesus, which was in the year approximately AD 33. There's some disagreement about the exact date, but usually around AD 33. The other one is what we call a watershed event, because everything can be marked whether it was before or after that date. In particular, we're looking at the destruction of the temple. The destruction of the temple by the Romans in AD 70. It makes a huge impact on the world, especially the world of the Christians and the world of the Jews, when the temple was destroyed. Turning to the language of the New Testament, one of the interesting things is the language of Jesus. Of course, the New Testament itself was written in what we call Koine Greek, but is that what Jesus spoke? Most likely Jesus spoke Aramaic. But it's also likely, because of what we call Hellenization, that he at least knew some Greek. Hellenization is a term that refers to the spread of the Greek language and culture throughout the circum-Mediterranean world in the ancient world. So Greek was known and spoken in the area where Jesus grew up. And so he almost certainly spoke some Greek, but also very surely he spoke Aramaic as his first language. So Koine Greek is a term that means the common Greek. It was a trade language that was used throughout the ancient world. Something like English today. You can go almost anywhere in the world today and find someone that speaks English, in the same way that in the ancient world you could see someone you could find someone that spoke Greek, the Koine Greek. So what was Koine Greek like? Well, let me give you John 3:16 in Koine Greek. Hutos gar egapesen hatheas tan kasman, hoste tan huian tan manogene eroken, hina pas hapistion esautan, mea paletai al eche zoin ionian. Now we don't know that that's exactly what it sounded like, because after all, we didn't have video cameras or audio cassettes in those days to know exactly, but this is our best reconstruction. Those who are speakers of modern Greek, they would disagree. They say, no, it sounded like the way that we say it. But who's to say for sure? So this is how we usually talk about Koine Greek. For the New Testament organization, we can break it down into several sections. First of all, we have the Gospels. The Gospels can further be divided up. The first three, we call them the Synoptic Gospels, because they follow very similar structure and order of events as compared to the Gospel of John, which is quite different in how it presents Jesus and how it's organized and the timeline that's there. Following the Gospels comes the book of Acts. Like the Gospels, it also is narrative or story. But of course, Acts talks about the history or the story of the church, whereas the Gospels told about the life of Jesus. Following Acts, we have the letters. First comes the Pauline epistles. Epistles is a term that we use to describe the letters of first Paul, and then we have the general or Catholic epistles. The Pauline epistles can be also divided into the church letters, and often we include Philemon there, because although it's addressed to an individual, it also addresses the church that meets in Philemon's home. And then we have the pastoral epistles. so called because they are addressed to leaders of the church, individual leaders of the church. After the epistles, both first the Pauline epistles, then the general epistles, finally we have the book of Revelation, which is a unique genre or kind of literature within the New Testament. When we consider the religious environment of the New Testament, we think of two aspects. First of all, the Greco-Roman religions, and then Second Temple Judaism. To think about the Greco-Roman religions, we can say there are, first of all, the Greek religion, then the Roman religion, and then we also have to add the mystery cults. The Greek religion, it's quite interesting when you study these religions. They tend to follow, the structure of the religion follows the political structure. So of course Greece is known for democracy, and so also the Greek religion is very democratic. The priests were elected, and so forth. Roman religion, somewhat linked to or like Greek religion in that often we talk about the gods being the same gods. Actually, that's a misunderstanding. The Greeks were conquered by the Romans, and the Romans said, it's almost like baptizing the Greek gods. You said that that's your God? No, actually that's really our God by this name. And so by renaming the gods, they were able to co-opt or control the religion of the Greeks. They also had very interesting structures of priestly colleges, they called them, that oversaw the Greek religion, the Roman religion. And the mystery cults, unlike the Greek religion and the Roman religion, which were really not optional. If you were a Roman, you were automatically a member of the Roman religion. If you were Greek, you're automatically a member of the Greek religion. But the mystery cults were optional, and you could maintain your attendance in the Greek or Roman religion and add on one of these optional other religions. They were especially marked by initiation, secret initiation. You weren't allowed to tell what happened in your initiation process. And they were really, really good at that. It seems that there was, on pain of death, you couldn't tell what happened. And so even till this day, most of the time we don't really know what happened in those religions. We know a lot more about the Second Temple Judaism. There's a lot more literature there. Second Temple Judaism is so called because it existed during the time when the Second Temple was standing. So we can say from 539 before Christ until 70 AD. I already mentioned the destruction of the temple. It's interesting to consider the groups within Second Temple Judaism. We have, some are very well known to us. We know about the Pharisees because of their prominence in the Gospels. But we also have the Sadducees, a group that doesn't feature in the New Testament but was also very well known in those days is the group of the Essenes. Like the Pharisees, they were a group of religious people in the Second Temple Judaism which were very keen to express their views, and they differed on their theology. The most famous group of Essenes is the Qumran community, which left us the Dead Sea Scrolls. At least that's the best scholarly reconstruction, that was an Essene community. A fourth group, we can say, a little bit separate from all of those because it's not really a philosophy or a theology of religion, but we talk about the priests. The priests were serving in the temple. One of the really interesting things that I just always captures my imagination on the priests, there's a letter that, a little bit before the New Testament period, but a letter, one of these long, long letters that describes the priestly activity. And one of the things that so captures my imagination, it says that they did their work in silence. Wow. You can imagine all of the animals being sacrificed, all of the people coming, and yet the priests function in silence. That tells me that they knew their job so well. They didn't have to scramble here and scramble there and ask who's supposed to do this and what shall we do now. No, they knew exactly what they were supposed to do and exactly when. We can talk as well about the institutions of Second Temple Judaism. We have the temple itself. One of the things that's not well recognized is that there were actually more than one temple. There was a temple in Egypt, as well as the temple of the Samaritans. That features just a tiny bit in the Gospels, but sometimes we don't even recognize that it's talking about a temple when it talks about that. We have also the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is famous because of Jesus' trial, but actually we should say Sanhedra, because there was more than one Sanhedrin scattered throughout the land of Israel in those days. And finally, the synagogue. Synagogue is very interesting. It's a meeting place for the Jews outside of the temple. The most likely historical rise of the synagogues was that they were established outside of Palestine first. For those people who couldn't come and worship in the temple, they said, we still need a place where we can meet and worship together. And then, as people moved back, very common for older people to move back to Jerusalem because they wanted to die there. They go to Jerusalem to end out their days. Then often they would bring with them this idea that they had learned. So they brought the idea of the synagogue with them and established synagogues. And then people coming from other places would say, wow, there's a synagogue here. That's such a great idea, and carry that back with them. So many things to learn about Second Temple Judaism that helps us to understand what's going on in the New Testament. So to recap what we've learned in this session, first of all, the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, and it was written in the last half of the first century. We can divide the New Testament into several sections: the Gospels, Acts, the Pauline epistles, the general epistles, and Revelation. And we can remember the religious environment of the New Testament, the Greco-Roman religions, not to forget the mystery cults, and the Second Temple Judaism.